Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. I'm SocietySucks and today I'm checking out You Would Be a Terrible Leader by CGP Grey. The majority of people who think they could be good leaders would be terrible, because they don't actually know what it takes to lead. But let's see Grey explain exactly that.
Do you want to rule? Do you see the problems in your country and know how to fix them? If only you had the power to do so. Well, you've come to the right place.
There's many problems and a lot of them are unfixable, unfortunately.
Ask yourself, why don't rulers see as clearly as you, instead acting in such selfish, self-destructive, short-sighted ways? Are they stupid, these most powerful people in the world, or is it something else? The throne looks omnipotent from afar, but it is not as it seems. Take the throne to act, and the throne acts upon you. Accept that or turn back now before we discuss the rules for ruling.
I mean, obviously, if you actually find yourself in a position of power, there will be certain things you are forced to do which you might not want to do, but you simply don't have a choice. So yeah, the throne rules you.
No matter how bright the rays of any Sun King, no man rules alone. A king can't build roads alone, can't enforce laws alone, can't defend the nation or himself alone. The power of a king is not to act, but to get others to act on his behalf, using the treasure in his vaults. A king needs an army and someone to run it, treasure and someone to collect it, law and someone to enforce it. The individuals needed to make the necessary things happen are the king's keys to power.
They also need to be trustworthy.
You wish to make are but thoughts in your head if the keys will not follow your commands. In a dictatorship where might makes right, the number of keys to power is small, perhaps only a dozen generals, bureaucrats, and regional leaders. Sway them to your side and the power to rule is yours, but never forget, displease them and they will replace you.
They can overthrow you quite easily.
Spectrum from those where the ruler needs few key supporters to those where the ruler needs many. This foundation of power is why countries are different, yet many keys or few, the rules are the same. First, get the key supporters on your side. With them, you have the power to act. You have everything. Without them, you have nothing. Now, in order to keep those keys to power, you must, second, control the treasure. You must make sure your treasure is raised and distributed to you for all your hard work and to the keys needed to keep your position. This is your true work as a ruler, figuring out how best to raise and distribute resources so as not to topple the house of cards upon which your throne sits.
It's a delicate balance.
Aspiring, benevolent dictator may want to help your citizens, but your control of the treasure is what attracts rivals. So you must keep those keys loyal. But there's only so much treasure in your vaults, so much wealth your kingdom produces. So beware. Every bit of treasure spent on citizens is treasure not spent on loyalty. Thus, doing the right thing, spending the wealth of the nation on the citizens of the nation, hands a tool of power acquisition to your rivals. Treasure poured into roads and universities and hospitals is treasure a rival can promise to key supporters if only they switch sides. Benevolent dictators can
and that's the main problem, it's greed.
Citizens, but the keys must
a lust for power and riches.
Even if you have gathered the most loyal, angelic supporters, they have the same problem as you, just one level down. Being a key
it's like
to
a ladder.
Power is a position of power.
It just keeps going down.
Watch out for rivals from below or above. Thus, the treasure they get must also be spent to maintain their position. The loyal and dim may stay by your side no matter what, but smart key supporters will always watch the balance of power, ready to change allegiance if you look to be the loser in a shifting web of alliances. In countries where the keys are few, the rewards are great, and when violence rules, the most ruthless are attracted, and angels that build good works will lose to devils that don't. So buy all the loyalty you can, because loyalty in dictatorial organizations of all kinds is everything. for the ruler anyway. Thus, the dictatorship exposed, a king who needs his court to raise the treasure to keep the court loyal and keep raising the treasure. This is the self-sustaining core of power. All outside is secondary. Now, a king with many key supporters has real problems. Not just their expense, but also their competing needs and rivalries are difficult to balance. The more complicated the social and financial web between them all, the more able a rival is to sway a critical mass. The more key supporters a
I wonder who the longest running dictator actually is. Because dictatorships, as far as I know, they usually don't last very long. They fall apart pretty quickly because they're overthrown by a rival, then that rival takes power, then he gets overthrown by a different rival, and it just continues. It's a cycle. Just take a look at any place in Africa.
Ruler has, on average, the shorter their reign, which brings us to the third rule for rulers: minimize key supporters. If a key in your court becomes unnecessary, his skills
get rid of him.
Required, you must kick him out. After a successful coup,
kicking him out is not a good idea because he could switch sides and go to your rival. So don't kick him out, imprison him or kill him, and frame it as a suicide.
New dictator,
he just fell out of the window.
Some of those who helped him come to power.
Russia does it all the time.
Working with the underlings of the previous dictator, which from the outside seems a terrible idea. Why abandon your fellow revolutionaries? Are the old dictator's supporters not a danger? But the keys necessary to gain power are not the same as those needed to keep it. Having someone on the payroll who was vital in the past but useless now is the same as spending money on the citizens. Treasure wasted on the irrelevant. And by definition, a dictator that pulls off a coup has promised greater treasure to those switching
Yeah, that's
sides.
true. So now he has to pay them more.
The vault has not changed, so the treasure must be split among fewer. A dictator that sways the right keys, takes control of the treasure, cuts unnecessary spending, kills unnecessary keys, will have a long and successful career. Seeing the structure unveiled, you might be excited to get started and control a country to the benefit of you and your cronies, or you might be exhausted, wishing
you might
to do good, but seeing
you might be able to take over some country in Africa or maybe Asia, but you're not taking over any countries in Europe or just in general the Western world. Like something like this is not going to happen here. Although then again, let's take a look at the US right now. Whatever.
The structural difficulties now turn to democracy for salvation. So let us discuss rulers as representatives. You again might have grand dreams of the utopia you wish to build, but no man rules alone, and never more so than in democracy.
In democracy, you need far more people.
Ministers must negotiate with their senates and parliaments and vice versa, and they all have their own key supporters to manage. In a well-designed democracy, power is fractured among many and is taken not with force, but with words, meaning you must get thousands or millions of citizens to, if not like you on election day,
at least like you more than the other guy.
Alternative. With so many voters and such fractured power, it's impossible to, as a dictator would, follow these rules and buy loyalty. Or is it? Of course not. Don't think of citizens as individuals with their individual desires, but instead as divided into blocks. The elderly or homeowners or business owners or the poor. Blocks you can reward as a group. Democracies have wildly complicated tax codes and laws, not as accident, but as reward for the blocks that get and keep the ruling representatives in power. Farming subsidies, for example, have nothing to do with the food a nation needs, but entirely
it's just about getting the votes.
The vote of the farming bloc is. Countries where
I mean, you can see this literally in every democracy.
Farmers' votes don't swing elections, don't have farming subsidies. If a bloc doesn't vote, such as younger citizens, then no need to divert rewards their way. Even if large in number, they are irrelevant to gaining power, which is good news for you. One less block to sway, and the treasure you give your key blocks has to come from somewhere. If you want long years in office, Rule 3 is your friend in a democracy just as much as a dictatorship. You can't eliminate those who don't vote for you, but there is still much you
can't just get rid of them.
Once in power, make it easier for your key blocks to vote and hard.
Although then again, technically, Russia is a democracy. Even though we all know it's not. You know, don't political opponents to Putin always just either end up in prison or falling out of a window or stepping in front of a bus? No, even in a democracy, you absolutely can get rid of people. It's just that everybody will know you're not truly a democracy even if you present yourself as one.
For others. Establish voting systems that reduce the number of blocks you need to win, the more rivals you get. Very handy indeed. Draw election borders to predetermine the results for you or your cronies, and
gerrymandering
pre-elections with Byzantine rules to determine who blocks even can vote for. Mix and match the above for even better power perpetuation. When approval ratings couldn't be lower, yet re-election rates couldn't be higher, you'll know you've succeeded. Now, enough with thinking about the citizens.
Doesn't Trump literally have an approval rate below 40% right now? I'm quite sure he's never even reached 50%, even during his first term, and yet they still elected him a second time. So this, I mean, we see the proof of this. Approval rates low, re-election rates high.
Even in a democracy, there still are very influential individual key supporters you need on your side, because their money or influence or favors keeps you in power. While you can't just promise to give them treasure directly as a dictator would, you can create loopholes for their investments, pass laws that they've written, or print get-out-of-jail-free cards for their actions. Not
Don't
a
pay
wheelbarrow
taxes.
of gold to the door, but contracts for their business. You as a ruler do have roads to build, or computers to maintain, or buildings to reconstruct. No man rules alone, after all. Or you could take the moral path and ignore the big keys, but you'll fight
But then you'll
against
lose support
those
immediately.
who didn't. Good luck with that. Corruption is not some kind of petty crime, but rather a tool of power in democracies and dictatorships.
Yeah.
But more on that another time.
No ruler can ever succeed without corruption, because without corruption you won't get into power, because even if you say no, someone else who is corrupt is going to get into power, and then you're done. That's just life. People are corrupt, and that's how it's always going to be.
So accept the favors, sway the key blocks, and you will get into power, ruling with actions that look contradictory and stupid to those who don't understand the game, privately helping a powerful industry you publicly denounced, or passing laws that hurt a bloc that voted for you. But your job isn't to have a
So far, none of this is
consistent,
surprising to me.
understandable ruling policy, but to balance the interests of your keys to power, big and small. That is how you stay in office. Now, with all this headache of being a representative, you may wonder, looking at Rule 3, why couldn't you skip all this block building, favor trading nonsense and just bribe the army to take power?
That's not gonna
work. We must finally
work.
turn to taxes and revolts. You must understand Rule 2 and how the treasure is raised and used to hold a country together. If we graph the tax rate of countries versus the number of key supporters the ruler needs, there's a clear relationship. More democracy, lower taxes. If you're sitting comfortably in a cushy democracy, you may scoff at this, but your fellow citizens who don't earn enough don't pay income taxes and get
I mean, this is completely true. I'm not sure what it's like in your country or exactly what it's like in the US, but here in Poland, there is a certain amount of money which is tax-free. So if you make only that much, you don't pay income tax. And there's two different, how do I call this, tax brackets? Tax levels? Let's just call it levels. The first and the second. The first one is 12%, the second is 32%. I'm just going to ignore the linear tax of 19% and the other ones because let's just focus on these two. You have 12 and 32%. I'm quite sure that the max for the 12% is 120,000 a year Polish zloty, which is like how much? A little less than 30,000 or a little more than $30,000 maybe. No, it's a little less, I think. Anyway, it's 120,000. Let's say you make 120,000. The first, I believe, 30,000 is tax-free, and then from the other 90,000, you pay 12%. If you get more than 120,000 a year, say 150,000, you don't pay 32% for all of it. You still have the first 30,000, which is free, no tax. Then the second part, which is the 90,000, which is taxed at 12%. And then the 30,000 extra above the 120,000, which is taxed at 32%. So yeah, More democracy equals less taxes.
Rebates, bringing the average tax rate down. In dictatorships, this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Dictatorships often forego tax paperwork in favor of just taking wealth directly. It's common for the dictator to force farmers to sell their produce to him for little, then turn around and sell it on the open market, pocketing the difference at an unthinkably high equivalent tax rate. So taxes in democracies are low in comparison to dictatorships. But why do representatives lower their take? Well, cutting taxes is a crowd pleaser. Dictators have no need to please
People
the
love
crowds and thus
paying
can
less.
take a large percentage from their poor citizens to pay key supporters. But representatives in a democracy can take a smaller percentage from each to pay their key supporters because their educated, freer citizens are more productive than peasants. For rulers in a democracy, the more productivity, the better, which is why they build universities and hospitals and roads and grant freedom.
Because that just ends up making more money.
The goodness of their hearts, but because it increases citizen productiveness, which increases treasure for the ruler and their key supporters, even when a lower percentage is taken. Democracy.
See, I don't really get it. So far, this is all just basic information, which you should have learned in school. So I don't know who really needs this video to learn this stuff, because they teach you this at school. At least in my school, they told us about all of this. Hey, I don't know, maybe it's different in your country? I don't know.
Are better places to live than dictatorships, not because representatives are better people, but because their needs happen to be aligned with a large portion of the population.
In a democracy, the politicians, they don't care about you.
Also make their lives better. Representatives
stay in power,
want everyone productive,
helping
so
you
everyone
helps them.
gets highways.
So, yeah.
The worst dictators are those whose incentives are aligned with the fewest citizens, those who have the fewest keys to power. This explains why the worst dictatorships have something in common: gold or oil or diamonds or similar. If the wealth of a nation is mostly dug out of the ground, it's a terrible place to live because a gold mine can run with dying slaves and still produce great treasure. Oil is harder, but luckily foreign companies can extract and refine it without any citizen involvement. With citizens outside this cycle, they can be ignored while the ruler is rewarded and the keys to power kept loyal. Thus, we live in a world where the best...
I want to add something here. Countries whose sole export is oil and nothing else are just dying countries. They're just waiting to die because the moment the oil is gone, that's it. They're done for. They have nothing left to offer. Tourism alone will not keep most countries alive. And once the money runs dry, which, well, it would be oil in this case, but oil is money, that's it. Country's done.
Smartest democracies are stable, the worst, richest dictatorships are stable, and in between is a valley of revolution. The resource-rich dictators build roads only from their ports to their resources and from their palace to the airport, and the people stay quiet not because this is fine or even because they're
they don't
scared,
have a choice.
but because
they don't want to die.
The truth is, starving, disconnected illiterates don't make good revolutionaries. Now, a middling dictator without resources must, as mentioned before, take a large amount of wealth directly from his poor farmers and factory workers. Thus, two roads won't do, and so he must maintain some minimums of life for the citizens. But keeping the workforce somewhat connected and somewhat educated and somewhat healthy makes them more able to revolt. Now understand, the romantic image of the people storming the gates and overthrowing their dictator is mostly a fantasy.
Yeah, it's not that easy.
Dictatorship, the people only storm the palace when the army lets them to remove you because you lost control over your keys and are being replaced. This is why, after popular revolts in middling dictatorships, the new ruler is often the same as the old, if not worse. The people didn't replace the king, the court replaced the king.
Yeah, that's something that I've always disliked about revolution, because the majority of the time you're replacing a tyrant with another tyrant and nothing changes. Revolution is a sham. It's BS.
Using the people's protest
the majority of the time
happen to do it. The very things a benevolent dictator wants to build to cross this valley take treasure away from the keys to power and make the citizens more able to revolt, often ending in a stronger ruler, less likely to build bridges and more loyal to his keys. On the other side, the best democracies are stable, not just because the large number of keys and their competing desires makes dictatorial revolt near impossible to organize, but also because the revolt would destroy the very wealth it intended to capture, the high productivity of the citizens. Plus, those helping the would-be dictator in a democracy know he plans to cull key supporters once in power. That's what a coup is. So potential key supporters must weigh the probability of surviving the cull and getting the rewards versus the risk of being on the outside of a dictatorship they helped create. In a stable democracy, that's a terrible gamble. Maybe you'll be incredibly wealthy, but probably you'll be dead and have made the lives of everyone you know worse. The math says no. Being on the right side of a coup in a dictatorship means having the resources to get you and your family what the peasants lack: healthcare, education, quality of life. This is what makes the competition for power so fierce. But in a democracy, most already have these things, so why risk it? So the more the wealth of a nation comes from the productive citizens of the nation, the more the power gets spread out, and the more the ruler must maintain the quality of life for those citizens. The less. Now, if a stable democracy becomes very poor, or if a resource that dwarfs the productivity of the citizens is found, the odds of this gamble change and make it more possible for a small group to seize power. Because if the current quality of life is terrible, or the wealth not dependent on the citizens, coups are worth the risk. When democracies fall, these are usually the reasons. These rules for rulers explain not only why some...
See, I was confused there a bit, because this video used to be called Rules for Rulers, but now it's called You Would Be a Terrible Leader. I don't know why Gray does this, but he always changes the thumbnails and the titles for whatever reason. Doesn't make much sense to me. Maybe he's just trying to keep the algorithm happy, make sure his videos seem new and get recommended to more people. I don't know. I mean, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Men are monsters and others are merciful, but everything about politics, from war to foreign aid to political dynasties to corruption, all of which we can talk about at another time. But for now, you aspiring ruler may be disgusted by the world of politics and have decided to avoid it entirely.
Pretty normal, that's just how it is.
For rulers come in many forms. Yes, kings, presidents, and prime ministers, but also deans, dons, mayors, chairs, chiefs. These rules apply to all and explain their actions, from the CEO of the largest global corporate conglomerate who must keep his board happy to the chair of the smallest homeowners association, managing votes and spending membership fees. You cannot escape structures of power. You can only turn a blind eye to understanding them. And
just pretend it doesn't exist.
The change you dream about, there's a zeroth rule you cannot ignore. Without power, you can affect nothing. You may not like these rules,
true,
but surely better you on the throne than someone else. And who knows, maybe you'll be different.
Nah, no chance. If you try to be too good of a person, you're gonna get removed almost immediately. Yeah, this is why I've always hated all politicians, regardless of whether they're on the left or the right or the center of the political spectrum, because they're all corrupt to a certain degree. They're all shit. None of them care about you. Those are the facts. Doesn't matter what they say or what they do, they don't do it for you. They do it for themselves. And yet there are people out there who actually think there are good politicians who care about the people. Biggest lie ever. I mean, you can have a different opinion, but the facts remain. This is how the world runs, unfortunately. And that's not gonna change, ever. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you want to see more reactions, check out this video right here. And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.